Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. Today, I will be sharing with you two scary stories that will frighten you to the core. So get ready, but before we do, make sure you subscribe and like, because if you do not, I will come and get you. So let's begin. And always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Number 1. The Room with the Train. I grew up in a small city, the kind of place you could barely call a town, if it wasn't for the sheer number of people living there. Downtown was only a couple of blocks long, and in the middle of it was one of the biggest buildings in the area. It was a local movie theater, named after the city. I remember going there when I was very young, about 7 years old, and watching the first Pokemon movie. It was probably nothing compared to the theaters we have nowadays, but back then, it was huge for me. I loved it. So when a few years later, I heard the cinema was going out of business, I felt really sad about it. The building was sold to a religious group that used it for their services. You know the type: loud music, big crowds with their arms in the air, singing prayers. Some having seizures on the stage while the pastor yells through a mic. Every time I walked past the old cinema, I would see the announcements of the congregation where the movie posters would have been. And if they were in session, you could hear them singing from the other side of the street. The group owned the cinema for nearly a decade, until the local government bought back the building in order to restore it as a historic landmark of the city. When this happened, I was studying construction, with the intent to follow architecture or civil engineering at college, and my class was very lucky to be involved with the cinema's restoration project because two of our teachers were architects working on it. I will always remember the day we went to visit the old cinema. Our class was small, only a handful of students, but we were all about the same age, so we all shared childhood memories of when the cinema was operational. We ran through the corridors of the auditorium, sat in the chairs just like we did when we were little kids, and began stomping on the wooden floor with our feet, filling the entire room with the echoes of our drumming and our laughter. A little ritual of sorts everyone used to do right before the beginning of the movie. Once nostalgia time was over, we went back to the purpose of the trip and began to survey the building. We were very excited because that was a unique opportunity to go into the places we would have never been allowed to otherwise. So we made sure to check every last corner, every single room, no matter how far, no matter how obscure. The first one we found was below the stage. On one of the corners, there was a little door, not very visible, probably because it was meant for maintenance staff only. Behind it, we found a long room filled with rusty boilers, part of the old heating system that was no longer in use. The place was a little creepy, with all of those old tanks and pipes crowding the narrow space. But what we found past them was what really started to freak us out. This room was small, very small. It was, after all, basically just leftover space behind the boilers. Yet it contrasted so much with the rest of the area around it. It may as well have been from a different place altogether. The pit walls were painted a light colour, white I think, but I don't remember it very well. because what really got my attention were the drawings in them. There were rainbows, a smiling sun, trees and flowers, and happy little people with smiles on their faces of dotted eyes. It was a daycare. The whole class and teacher gathered to see the discovery. We were all very confused about the strange place of this room. Okay, we couldn't understand the need for a place to keep the kids that were too little to be amongst the crowd during prayers, or maybe the ones of the people who worked there. But the placing was just odd. The stage was probably one of the loudest places in the auditorium during the services, and this was right below it, so there was no way it could be a quiet place for the children. We left the boiler's room and continued our tour through the theatre, a little puzzled about our finding, but not giving it too much thought. Outside of the auditorium, there were these bathrooms, both in terrible condition. The ticket sale booth and a huge set of stairs that led to a mezzanine in the auditorium. Half of the seats there were totally ruined due to a water leak in the roof. And I cursed these people for not taking proper care of the building. With that part done, all that was left was a projection room. On the third floor, behind the tickets booth, there was a door that led to a spiral stair. I don't remember how tall it actually was, but it must have been over 10 meters of metallic steps without a single resting spot. I wasn't exactly an athlete, but I could walk several kilometers with no problem, and rode on a bike to and from school every single day. Yet by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was exhausted. And I wasn't the only one. All of my classmates complained about how hard it was to walk up there. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the third floor. It was roughly a narrow passageway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment. And except for some trash, it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we were all excited to see, the projector room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history. We were all very thrilled to check it out, so no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there we saw it again. There was a train in this one instead of a rainbow. Something was written on it in big colourful letters. Something about Christ. I can't remember it well. The drawings were a bit old. The paint slightly peeled from the walls, but the colours were just as cheerful as you would expect for a place where children play. My heart sank to my stomach as I came to the realization of what that place really was. The one behind the boilers probably serving the same purpose. I took notice of how isolated that room was. Literally the furthest away you could possibly get from everyone else. I thought about the 3 floors of stairs and imagined what it would have been like to a child to walk all the way up only to end up in that room, the room with the colourful train in the wall. My classmates and I exchanged horrified expressions, as I knew they were thinking the same. We never visited the theatre again, even though we continued with the restoration project for several months, and we never talked about those 2 rooms. Cases of molestation in the church are well known by everyone, to the point that the pedo priest is practically a cliche. But this is the kind of thing you think happens in some place far away, in another city, even in another country. You'd never imagine it can happen in the very same town you live in, the place where you grew up, in the very same building where you once watched a Pokemon movie when you were 7 years old. Number 2. My first sleep paralysis story. I don't remember exactly when this was. I'm pretty sure it was around March of 2018. I was 12 years old and in 7th grade. I often listened to, read scary stories online about things like sleep paralysis, but I never thought it would happen to me. So before I had woken up, I was having a strange dream. I was playing Counter-Strike, but it felt like I wasn't playing and it was real. I was shooting some targets and then I blacked out for a second. I woke up on the main road that goes into my neighborhood and saw that the road was gone. The houses on my street were very small, two-story box houses. There were elderly people standing out front of the houses, all reading a newspaper, and the sign at the front of my neighborhood only read Brook, with the rest crumbling off. I then appeared at my morning bus for school looking at my phone. Everything was normal until a bush that normally isn't there screwed at me. I remember clearly feeling as though this was normal, so I screamed back. We went back and forth until I woke up with the scream echoing in my ears. I was in my bed looking against the wall, unable to move. I hadn't realized that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, but was still freaked out by that screaming to fall back asleep. I lay there, not hearing anything for about 5 minutes. I then heard what sounded like heavy boots hitting the ground out in my living room, coming towards my bedroom. Just so you know, outside my bedroom there is a hallway. On the left is a bathroom, at the end is my parents' room, and at the end of the right is a door that goes to my living room. The footsteps grew closer, coming to the hallway and then my parents' room. At that moment, I remember my dad was out of town on a business trip, so my mum, who is a nice small lady, was defenseless. I heard the walking start up again and come towards my room. The door opened and whatever was out there came in, walked to the side of my bed and stared at me. I closed my eyes and began to pray. I'm not very religious, but it's the only thing I can think to do. After what felt like hours, I tried to turn over to look and see if anyone is there. I roll over with my eyes, still closed to appear to anyone that is there that I'm still asleep. I open my eyes and begin to squint. The coast is clear. I crawl out my bed slowly and look at the clock. 4:14 a.m. Dang, I got school tomorrow, I thought. I tiptoed over to my bedroom. I grabbed a decorative orb my mum put on the wall in my room and walked out into the hall. The light in our living room door was open with light on which was not normal, especially when my dad's out of town. I check the bathroom and peek around the corner of the door. Nobody. So I make a silent sprint into my mum's room. Putting the oar down on the floor, I shake her awake, quietly whispering her name. Mama, I think there's someone in the house. I heard walking around outside my room and I began to tear up, realizing this all may have been in my head, and I woke up my mum for nothing. It's alright. We can go check the house real quick. I grab the oar and go check the house with my mother. There was nobody in our house. So I go back to bed, relieved that we were safe and that none of that was real. I haven't had a sleep paralysis experience since, and I'm glad it wasn't worse. This story seems like nothing compared to some of the other stories about it that I've heard. I hope you enjoy reading this. And now I will be reviewing and mentioning the authors' names of both stories. So the first story was written by Krylets, and the title was The Room with the Train. Now this was a disgusting and scary and very eye-opening story about, yeah, a very sensitive topic. It's very disgusting, and it's very scary. It's not about ghosts, it's about predators and obviously XYZ. So I will not be rating the story because it's very creepy and scary, and I hope this story isn't real, to be honest. I hope it's just a fan made story that someone made up. Now, the second story is by the Stevie Games, and it's titled My First Sleep Paralysis Story. And this is a very good story. I quite enjoyed it. It was very short, but it was to the point. It had all the creepy things about someone. However, usually when people talk about sleep paralysis, they talk about how there's a heavy feeling on their chest. They can't move. There's someone staring into their eyes and in their faces and stuff. That's the feeling they have. However, the OP did not have this. The OP felt as if someone was actually in the house. Now, off topic, I would also like to mention that I had actually had a dream once. I should only be sharing it, but I had a dream where I was laying down on the bed, and basically my parents were at the bottom of the stairs calling my name. I was in my bedroom, they were calling my name, and I couldn't reply. There was someone in my face that was breathing on my face, and it was stopping me from talking. So it was just constantly, they were saying my name and I couldn't speak. There was something on my chest staring down at me, and breathing into my mouth, and they were trying. It was I think the only nightmare I remember, to be honest. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. I have no idea, to be honest. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't, who knows. But I wanted to mention this under the story because it's a sleep paralysis story. I rate this a 10 out of 10. I enjoyed it. And now I'm going to leave Mr. Midnight to do the outro. So I'll see you again very soon. Take care and bye.
Well, my children, thank you all for listening. I hope these stories terrified you to your cause, because I'm sure they did. Because soon enough, as you hear it, the fear and the sorrow that circulate through your veins, I will taste, and it's going to be a feast. I'll see you very soon. So until then, love the darkness as it always follows.